Hello everybody, welcome to this Planning Committee meeting of South Oxfordshire District Council. I'm Councillor David Brotherton and I will be chairing this meeting. I remind everyone this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. Only members of the public registered to speak are allowed to do so, and I will call on them to speak during the appropriate agenda item. This meeting is being held in our offices in Abbey House, Abingdon. Committee members are here in person, but officers and public speakers are able to join remotely. The meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. The system has the ability to allow councillors who are unable to attend in person to contribute to the meeting, but only councillors who are present in person are allowed to vote. A few procedural notes for speakers and other members of the public who have logged on remotely. Please ensure that your microphone is muted and that your camera is off for the duration of the meeting until you are called to speak. If you do share a presentation on screen, please make sure that you stop sharing as soon as it's no longer needed. Councillors wishing to ask a question or participate in the debate are asked to indicate this by letting yourself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be by show of hands. Please raise your hands clearly and keep it raised to allow a count to take place. If it is unclear as to how members are voting for a show of hands, I'll ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. A few housekeeping announcements. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediate to the right of this room, and then go to Assembly Point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. Democratic Services officer present will assist you. And everyone here, please ensure that their mobile phones are switched to silent or switched off during the meeting. We're snapping mobile phones. And as just a little warning, actually, councillors and speakers in the room, please be aware that the cameras and microphones are live for the duration of the meeting, and we'll pick up everything that is said. Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after their application has been debated are welcome to do so by the route previously mentioned. The meeting has ended. I will ask for confirmation that a live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. I'll now move to the agenda. There's 6 bits of paper in. So chair's announcements, I've just done that. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. Darius, have we got any apologies?
Yes, Chair. Apologies for absence were received from Councillor Ali Gordon-Creed, who was substituted for Councillor Joe Robb, and also Councillors Tim Bearder and Sam James Laurie.
No substitutes.
Just Councillor Joe.
Yeah, we'll make note of that. Yeah. Agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. To adopt and sign as a correct record the planning committee meetings of the meetings held on the 7th of June 2023, 19th of April 2023, 21st September 2022, 17th of May 2022, and the 1st of September 2021. Bit of a backlog. Has anybody got any comments on those agendas? Accepted, Chairman. Thank you. That's seconded. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. All those in favour. Yeah. I can now pass these to Marius Julie. Right. Agenda item 4: declaration of interest. To receive declaration of disposal of peculiar interest, other registered interests, and non-registered interests of any conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. Seeing none, thank you. Urgent business. To receive notes of any matters of security terms will be urgent.
No urgent business.
No urgent business. Agenda item 6 is one I normally cringe at. Proposals for site visits.
Yes, I would like to propose a site visit for item 11 on the agenda, the annex, the White House Boundary. It's quite a complicated application, and it's important to get a clear understanding what the issues are on this site.
Okay, I'm going to second that. I've looked at through this and I have difficulty understanding it and follow the drawings. So I think a site visit will be very, very valuable to Councillor. Anybody want to speak on that, Councillor Arnold?
Yeah, just briefly. Is this the one at Shiplake?
Yes.
Yeah, I spent about 2 hours looking at this, and I turned the drawings around one way and another. And like you were just saying now, I didn't have a clue what was what. I've been reading architecture drawings for some 50 years, and that's probably one of the worst ones I've ever seen. So I think it would be a good idea to go there and see exactly what is being proposed. So I support.
Okay, thank you. We'll show of hands on that, please. All those for, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Unanimous, not unanimous. Thank you. Okay, public participation.
Chair, just to be, I think we've got a public speaker, at least one who's logged on for that.
Okay,
Item. So just to be absolutely clear.
just to be absolutely clear then.
In respect of item number 11, that's the White House, Olney Road, Lower Ship Plate, which will be deferred to a later meeting.
Yes, it will not be discussed this evening. Right, so we'll go to the applications. The first one should be agenda item 8, which is with Heath. It's Mark Pull on the opposite. So, Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to begin by updating the members of the committee that since the publication of my report, I have received one additional neighbour letter. This letter is in support of the proposed development, citing community benefit of the barn and general support for the barn. The visit was conducted yesterday and attended by 5 members of the planning committee. This application seeks retrospective planning permission to change the use of the agricultural barn adjacent to the Bottom and Glass Inn. Barn will be used for outdoor dining in a seating area to be used in association with the Bottom and Glass Inn. Barn contains an area for internal and external seating and dining. It also contains a shipping container which is used as a kitchen and an area dedicated within for a bar. The kitchen container is equipped with an extraction unit which includes the provision of an external flue pipe. The barn has been enclosed with cladding to assist in weatherproofing the structure, and the timber fence partially encloses land forward of the barn where the extraction pipe exits the barn. Internal lighting is provided by string lights and through gaps in the upper level cladding. In addition to seeking retrospective planning permission for the change of use of this barn, this application also seeks planning permission to extend the barn to the rear in order to provide toilet facilities and to extend the existing car park to provide an overflow car parking area. The extension to the barn would be finished in timber cladding similar to the barn with a corrugated metal roof. As discussed within the report before you, officers consider the principle of the proposed development to be acceptable. The barn has been used as an extension to the Bottom Glass Inn and has assisted in helping the pub during the COVID-19 pandemic. The works carried out on site are not considered to be detrimental to the character or appearance of the site. The agricultural aesthetics of the site and surroundings remain legible, but subject to the implementation of enhanced landscaping on site, the proposed development is not considered to adversely harm the children's area of outstanding natural beauty. Officers have extensively considered the impact of the proposed development on local amenities in the area, including the amenity of neighbouring properties. Noise, odour and light have been considered in detail within the report before you, and measures have been implemented already on site to address the kitchen container and its extraction unit. Officers do not consider the development will result in any significant adverse effects on the amenity of neighbours. Appropriate levels of parking have been proposed, which have been agreed by the local highway authority. The local highway authority seeks to secure the provision of cycle parking on site, which can be secured via a condition. Biodiversity gain will also be achieved via enhanced and new landscaping on site. This can also be secured via a condition which requires the submission of a landscaping scheme to be agreed in writing and implemented in accordance with the scheme. Officers are satisfied that the proposed development accords with the council's development plan and is subject to conditions planning permission should be granted. Planning conditions would cover matters relating to the amenity protection, including the limitation of live music, external lighting, and customer activities and events outside of the barn itself. It would seek the submission and agreement of site provision and a scheme for landscaping of the site. Officers recommend that planning permission is granted this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'll now go to our speakers on this one. Alex Sargent and David Halliday. Are you on your own?
I am. Yeah, apologies, Alex isn't with us. He's in the middle of the regatta. It's
You're David Halliday.
it's busy time.
Okay. And you have your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks very much for letting me speak. I just wanted to sort of discuss the natural curve of how this came about. Obviously, COVID was pretty brutal for very many sectors. Hospitality was certainly one of them. and the barn came into fruition due to the old part of the pub is very, very small. And as soon as people were allowed back in after the outside dining, our trade pretty much dried up because it's a very, very small 300-year-old frontage of the pub. And we've got a restaurant to the rear. So that's pretty much predominantly traded as a restaurant. So I got in contact with our landlord, the Phillimore Estate, and asked if we could use the barn. And very quickly, they came back and said if it's going to aid in the survival of the pub, absolutely. And within a couple of weeks, we turned it into what we then called a burger barn. And from there, it kind of really sort of grasped everybody's excitement, really, because you can come, bring your kids, bring dogs. It's very, very relaxed in the sense that it is a rustic barn. And from there, we started reinvesting in things like the container kitchen to keep the EHO happy and making sure that we were doing it in such a way that was in accordance with, how you'd operate a hospitality business. We're very fortunate in the sense that, we've been there 7 years and, pubs have huge turnover of people. We've got a landlord that really supports us and wants longevity in the site itself. My kids go to the local school. I live 2,000 yards away from the pub itself. So as a local amenity, we have meat Father Christmas, things that we have school PTAs, we have farmers meetings, associations in there, quiz nights, bingo nights, things such as that, as well as it doing coffees and pastries and things at the weekend. The cycle provision, I've literally just sort of finished reading this, the cycle provision, we welcome absolutely 100%. All of the planting with native species and all those sorts of things, we'd be absolutely over the moon. But the landlord within the Phillimore Estate have already verbally pledged a chunk of money in order to make good some of the concerns, i.e. noise, odour, all those sorts of things. We'd like to upgrade all of those things. And it's also worth mentioning the Phillimore Estate haven't charged us a penny for being in there ever since we first went in there in 2020, which has been amazing. And it has solely been the reason that the pub has been able to survive through that period of time. So now we really want to try and move it to sort of Barn 2.0 and make it something, pretty special for the community for the future. It's also worth mentioning that it employs at least across a weekend another 5 to 6 people. When it's open full time, we have 2 people in there pretty much full time, which is pretty good. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Well, sweet. Committee, has anybody got any questions for Mr. Holiday?
You just have the photograph that was on, first of all, showing the inside.
The inside. Don't know where it's gone to.
So Tom will display that shortly.
Tom's running that somewhere.
It should be.
Well, I'll answer the question anyway.
Mhm.
We did ask numerous questions on health and safety and environmental issues and this, that and the other, and you've clarified all those for us. Can you just tell me one thing on health and safety? The big extractor fan, how is that fixed to the ceiling?
It's chained. It's got a load of something like 100 tons. So it's chained to the structure of. Is it up there? Yeah. So here you can see all of these chains. There's a series of chains that run from here to here. So it's within the structure of the barn itself. It's not just hanging free.
It's not fixed to the barn roof with all the holes in it.
It's not fixed to the barn roof with all the holes in it. No, it's certainly not.
And if planning permission is granted, I take it that you will be doing repairs on the building.
Yeah, we want to keep its integrity very much so, because that's kind of part of the reason why I think people love it. But we want to be able to make sure it's wind and watertight so we can trade it 12 months of the year. It's basically to keep it wind, watertight, make sure that we tick all of the boxes, get rid of the chip floor, put down proper concrete, make sure there's loose, sanitary, drainage, all of those sorts of ABCs.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Holiday. Thank you. Right, I don't think the ward councillors are here, they're not on screen. So it's back to the opposite. Back to Mr. Pullen for questions. Anybody got any questions?
I've got a very quick one, Mark. In the thank you for your report. In the conditions, the recommended conditions, one of them says no live music at the premises and no amplified sound outside of the barn. Could I just clarify that, please? I mean, that presumably would not exclude the possibility of a loud disco, which could be as loud as live music happening within the barn. So I'm just wondering if that condition shouldn't be clarified a little bit, given that the barn, I know this barn, I probably would have declared it, I've been there for burgers many times with my family, so I know how thin those walls are. I don't expect they'll be providing much soundproof protection for neighbours.
So the live music premise is something that can be controlled. We can monitor that as well. We know if live music is being played. With regards to amplified sound, I think that's more in the sense that we want to be able to ensure that all the music that is played, say recorded music or something, is kept within the barn itself and not in the barn.
You can't hear it outside the barn. That's the intention. But
yeah, the intention is not to have it blaring outside essentially.
And you're satisfied that that barn will be able to contain?
Yeah, I mean, it has already been continuing. It's already been functioning for the last year or so since lockdown. We have environmental protection. Our team has been involved in the site in terms of improving upon the extraction, and they've been there many times. They're satisfied that any noise or anything coming from the barn would get to a level where it would result in a statutory sort of nuisance complaints. And generally content with that. With the hours of operation as well, we're looking to restrict the use of the barn past 10 o'clock. So if any function or something will be in there using, they then go into the pub itself if it goes on past 10 o'clock. So there are measures in place that hopefully mitigate any severe sort of harm past a statutory nuisance.
Yeah, I think this is one of those areas where functions of the council sort of overspill one to the other one. You know, noise is environmental health, and so is housing emerging from the building is environmental health. So it's difficult for us to employ. Light spillage, I'm not sure it is, but
light spillage can be controlled. I mean, we put an external lighting restriction essentially.
Yeah.
Unless they come forward with this that they submit to us to be considered. So if they do want external lighting, then it has to go to us first. Yeah. And obviously, we need to consider the sort of exposure of the site on the countryside.
Yeah. It was just interesting on, I say, spilling over into other areas of the council, licensing. And it is licensed separately, so I was informed. But yet it acquired all the separate licensing conditions that the pub has got by default. So although we're trying to impose an operation 8:30 till 2200, it's licensed outside those periods. We can't change that. Any question?
Yeah. So I'm a bit concerned about the extract, especially as there was a complaint about it as well. I mean, along the same sort of lines as Joe, in a way, how do you control that? How do you monitor it and stop that from becoming a nuisance? Especially in a village area. I mean, something contains these things could be dreadful, can't they? So
we've had so the initial extraction that I put in was considered, and then we asked for a noise and odour report to be submitted to mitigate any harm caused by that. They then changed that to an appropriate product, which we signed off and said it's okay with. So in that sense, we're happy with the product that they're using and that the noise filtration, noise, yes. And since it has been installed, the council haven't received any complaints as a result of that. I can't speak to how long it's been in there, but that's generally our way of kind of controlling whether or not there's any issues of that at the moment. No concerns raised since that's been installed. In terms of measurement, there is the Environmental Protection Act would cover any concerns that people might have. We go out and measure it. But yeah, that's really the scope of the Environmental Act.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Councillor Harvett.
Yeah, can I just ask a question on page 40 where it's got neighbours, you've got object 9. Is that 9 different objectors?
9 different objectors, yes.
Is there any reason why none of the objectors is here this evening to speak?
I can't speak to that, unfortunately. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
They would have received notification.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And we've got the committee now for a proposal, please. Well, sort out between you.
I propose to go with officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Yeah, okay. Any debate? Anyone want to express their views on things?
I'm just saying the fact that it's well within the area it operates in. The fact there's going to be improvements to the building. The concerns appear to be addressed, particularly within the conditions. It is of community use, which is great, and provides local employment too. So, and a thriving business and a thriving pub is always something that we wish to support in the right circumstances.
Thank you. Oh.
Yeah, we had a good walk around the whole area, and the houses are a fair way away up from the barn. But the other thing where we finished up was at the back of the pub itself. There's an area all around there, an open area with tables and chairs in. And one would imagine the noise from there, if there is a noise, would be less than what would take place in a farm, which is probably 100 yards away. And there's only one property, I would think, would probably hear anything. And I don't believe it would be that loud. But as I say, we put numerous questions to the applicant, and I think we're all fairly satisfied with what we heard on response. And I just wish them all the best. I hope it goes from what it is now to even better in the future.
Okay, so without the holes in the roof.
Without holes in the roof, yeah, if they can be fixed.
Okay, no further debate. We'll go to a vote. All those in favour of officer's recommendation, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. That planning permission will be issued in due course. So now go to agenda item 9. Another question for different reasons. This is Four Horseshoes in Checkenden, and I don't know the options.
Paul Lucas
is presenting online. Okay, over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. These applications seek full planning permission for conversion and subdivision of a vacant public house to 2 dwellings and the erection of a detached dwelling and carport and formation of new vehicular accesses on Main Street and Deers Lane. The applications also seek listed building consent for the works required to facilitate the conversion and subdivision. Your officers consider that the property remains unviable as a community facility due to the extant partial residential conversion and previous decision to accept a total residential conversion. As discussed at paragraphs 6.3 and 6.4 of the report, the subdivision of the property into 2 units is acceptable in policy terms. Your officers consider that the principle of development in relation to the infilling with a new build dwelling is supported in principle in this settlement and within the conservation area by local policy plan policy H16 as discussed at paragraph 6.5 to 6.9 of the report. The works to facilitate the subdivision of the listed building into 2 plots incorporate a single-storey extension, reconstructed outbuilding, detached garage and internal alterations. Of these, the Council's Conservation Officer considers that the subdivision of the historic structure would result in some loss of significance, but only result in a very low level of harm due to this being achievable in a sensitive and reversible manner. The Conservation Officer considers that the new build dwelling would erode some of the space within the setting of the listed building. It would also cause increased enclosure close to the road junction within the Checkenden Conservation Area. However, in their opinion, this would be limited to close views next to the proposed dwelling in the approach from Deers Lane. The submitted street scene elevations show that this listed building would still be visually prominent in the street scene. As a very localised impact, this would result in a low level of less than substantial harm. Your officers consider that the elements involved in the conversion and subdivision would give rise to limited changes to established built form. The new build dwelling and carport would be a more significant change, but its position would lie within a line of existing buildings and would be of a scale and design that would reflect the local vernacular. As outlined in paragraph 6.19 of the report, your officers consider that the landscape setting of this part of the settlement within the Chilterns AONB would be conserved. Your officers consider that the interrelationship between the proposed plots and the neighbours would be acceptable in respect of light, outlook and privacy. In the expert opinion of the local highway authority, the proposed access and parking arrangements would not give rise to conditions prejudicial to highway and pedestrian safety in compliance with local plan policy Trans 5. The proposal would accord with the spirit of local plan policy H11 in terms of the market housing mix and internal space standards. Matters relating to tree and hedge protection, protected species, drainage, energy reduction and external lighting could be dealt with through the recommended conditions. NPPF paragraph 202 explains that where a development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including, where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. In this instance, the primary public benefit would be securing a viable use for the listed building that would maintain its special historic and architectural interest for the benefit of future generations. In officers' view, this carries significant weight. There would also be a public benefit from the contribution that the provision of 3 dwellings in a settlement identified as suitable for small-scale infill development would make towards the district's housing supply. Your officers consider that cumulatively, these public benefits would be sufficient to outweigh the low level of less than substantial harm that the conservation officer has identified arising from the proposed development. Your officers consider that the planning and listed building consent applications will comply with the relevant development plan policies, and on that basis, it is recommended that planning permission and listed building consent are granted.
Thank you, Paul. If you could just stand by, and we'll come back to you after we've heard the other speakers. Right, so the first speaker I have is Tim Corbishley. Chairman, you can see, and you have your, well, so you settle down. Right, so you have 5 minutes starting now.
Okay, I want to concentrate my comments on the preservation and protection of the Checkington Conservation Area and also the public response to this application by way of objection. This is the largest volume of response that we've ever seen to any application in the village, and we're a very small village. Community feeling is high. If you drive into the centre of Checkington and the centre of our conservation area at this moment, you will see a cluster of just 9 residences of historical importance which are visible, some dating from the mid-15th century. We also have a 900-year-old church, a mid-Victorian forge, an 1840s school, plus a very attractive flint and brick village hall built in the arts and crafts style. Just one new house has been built in the centre in the last few years, which is relatively unobtrusive. So our conservation area has remained largely unchanged for 1 century, certainly since its inception as a conservation area. This protection has worked well to our expectations and so far fulfilled its purpose. When we consider the entire site of the Four Horseshoes, then we see significant changes to this situation. 2 new houses have already been approved in the back garden, and if you put that one on, you'll see that the back garden is a large part, quite a large part of the site. Not part of the current application, but part of the very same site. The parish council and others did not like this, although these houses are behind the old pub. The development does constitute a small degree of incremental harm to our conservation area. In the application under consideration, we now see a further 3 houses, 3 dwellings, making 5 houses on the same site, where 1 pub once stood. I stress that the parish council, however, does not object to the division of the original old building into 2 residences. We supported the change of use from commercial to residential for the old pub some years ago, as we appreciated it was not viable as a business. We, and clearly many of the residents of Checkington, do, however, object very strongly to that part of the proposal to erect a new house at the front of the plot. This is very prominent in our conservation area and harms it greatly, and I disagree with the officers on this. This structure is highly visible from the approach along Deers Lane and Main Street in both directions. We think 4 dwellings are plenty on this at this formerly quiet rural T-junction with their associated entrances and parking areas. We still see plenty of opportunity to add houses to this village, but outside the conservation area. And this is usually done when 60s built bungalows on large sites change hands. We are unashamedly protective of our old village centre and consider the planning department undertaken to recommend approval for this one new house that will permanently harm it. There's much emphasis in planning literature, local plan, to take account of local feeling. There's much emphasis in many areas of local government to listen to public opinion too. We hope that committee members will appreciate the feelings of the community with this in mind. Our intention is not to have the application dismissed as a whole, but only that it's amended to remove the new build onto the site. So in conclusion, I'll quote a bit of King Charles, words from 1984 when he was Prince of Wales, in that we may be about to see a carbuncle. He said a monstrous carbuncle. I don't think it's that big, but we don't want our conservation area degraded since it's thus far been unspoiled. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Richie, have you got any questions for Mr. Corbishley? Yes, Ed. Councillor,
Sorry, very tentative, because I drove up there yesterday, and I agree, it's a beautiful village, very, very nice conservation area. But that house opposite in Deer Lane is quite new, isn't it? It doesn't look that old.
That's the one new one. That's the only one new one we have. So that's sort of in sight in the village row.
Yeah. So what's been proposed there, I looks at it, first of all, it looks like it's in line with that one. So it's being quite carefully considered. And it's quite low rise as well, isn't it? I just asking that question.
Oh, well, we think it's very prominent and really, as I say, the conservation area is really been untouched. You know, I was born in this village 72 years ago, and the view from my front garden hasn't changed at all. And so that's the one new house. Yeah. It's relatively low rise. It's quite hidden, but that's the only one in the conservation area that shows.
Yeah.
We just don't want a large upstanding one in front of the sort of 15th century pub.
Any further questions?
Yes. So if you looked at the sort of finishes of the proposed new dwelling, it appears to be a mixture of flint on the base to the main street and brick to the Deers Lane. Does that fit in with the other dwellings, other buildings in the conservation area to have this sort of?
I won't say it doesn't fit in, but it's just a new building on a relatively open and rural T-junction, and it's just going to stick up in our conservation area as a new building.
And you asked us to actually only consider half the application. We can't do that. It's the whole of the application or none of it. We can't split it up.
We're asking for a further amendment to the plan or something like that.
So, committee, we can only
or refuse or
adjudicate on what's there.
Yeah,
It's either refuse it or accept it. We can't split it. Okay, thank you, Mr. Corbishley.
Thank you.
The second speaker is the art agent or the architect.
Appearing virtually.
Sorry?
Appearing virtually.
Appearing virtually. Oh, it's not the name I got on my list, but
It was updated.
it was updated. Sorry. Yeah, Darius did speak to me earlier on. Yeah. Okay, so that's Dalton Brook Reed.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you
Okay.
can hear me okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. Have your 5 minutes starting now.
Thank you very much for having me this evening. The proposals for the conversion and subdivision of the vacant Four Horseshoes public house and the construction of a single new build dwelling on its former car park site follow an extensive planning history on the site, as outlined by the case officer and in the agenda documents. Our understanding is that the Four Horseshoes has been vacant for approximately 10 years. This includes an extant approval for the full conversion of the public house to residential use and a recent supportive pre-application inquiry for the construction of a single new build dwelling on the adjacent land. This application originally sought consent for two new build dwellings on the car park land, in addition to the subdivision of the public house. However, this was amended to a single new build dwelling following constructive dialogue with the case officer. The principle of new build dwellings within the built limits of villages, including Checkenden, is supported by the South Oxfordshire Local Plan, which defines Checkenden as a smaller village, and that's the third most sustainable category of settlement in the district. It's our view, which has been accepted by the officers both at pre-application and subsequent full application stages, that the new build dwelling constitutes infill development. Policies H1, H8 and H16 together confirm support for the redevelopment of land in all parts of the district and encourage new homes in smaller villages through such infill developments. The proposal is of appropriate scale to its context and carefully positioned within the site to ensure there is minimal impact on the setting and the appreciation of the listed public house. This is further reinforced by the recent approval for a semi-detached pair of dwellings to the southwest of the Four Horseshoes, which only serves to extend the ribbon of residential development and highlight that the former car park site is an anomalous gap within it. The land identified for the new build serves no purpose. It is private space formerly used for parking and has not been identified as being of public value for its openness or the contribution to the character of the area. Nonetheless, Plot 3 has purposefully been set back so as to not disturb views to and the setting of the former public house and to retain a sense of space and openness to the frontage within a conservation area. Rightly so, the listed building would continue to read as the principal building on the site. The proposed conversion and subdivision of the listed building, along with sensitive remedial works, will enhance the appearance of the vacant building and secure its prominence as a feature when travelling through Checkenden. The proposed extensions to the building will replace inappropriate and low quality historic additions to the building, thus further enhancing the heritage assets. Any harm to either the listed building or the wider conservation area that would be caused by the new dwelling has been assessed by officers as low level and is outweighed by the benefits of the scheme, which includes substantial enhancements to the listed building and the provision of 3 much needed homes of mixed size. Both policy H17 and the MPPF support the subdivision of appropriate existing buildings, and this scheme offers 2 houses within the existing building in place of the extant consent for 1, offering smaller and more affordable units, yet still suitable for family occupation. Oxfordshire County Council Highways does not consider the settlement to be a sustainable location for development. However, the local plan, which has been subject to robust scrutiny via a public examination, said that it is. The starting point for decision-making is this development plan, which in this case is recently adopted and conforms to national guidance. In all other respects, the proposals conform to OCC highway standards in relation to access, visibility and parking requirements. And as a location with a good range of local services and access to those close by, Checkenden is a good place to be building new homes of the limited scale proposed here, whilst also making best use of the vacant building and surplus land of limited value. In conclusion, and acknowledged by the officers, the proposals provide an opportunity to utilise the vacant site and preserve the integrity of the listed building to develop 3 high-quality family homes, which will positively contribute to both the conservation area and wider Checkenden and are commensurate with the scale and style of their context. The commercial viability of the conversion is dependent upon the further units, otherwise the heritage asset will continue to degrade in its current state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rooktree. Has anybody got any questions for him? Sure, Mr. House. Come on.
Thank you. I the pictures that are shown on the application, proposed street elevation, appears to show that the thatched roof is retained on the existing building. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
I'm a bit puzzled though on the planning application itself. The form says existing roof covering is thatch and tile, and the proposed roof covering is tile. Could you? There seems to be some discrepancy there. Then.
So the existing roof coverings on the the existing building will remain. The roof coverings that are proposed relate solely to those of the extensions to the rear.
Right, so the thatched area will remain thatched. That's correct.
That's correct. That's correct.
Councillor Sadler?
Yeah, so plot 3, I can't see anything there about the size. I'm just concerned about parish councillor's point about the street scene. You've got the pub, fairly low rise. The one in opposite in Deer Lane is fairly low rise as well. Just answering that question about the carbuncle, as it were, in the street. I mean, what's that street scene going to look like? Because I can't see anything on the paperwork that shows that.
There are some street elevations uploaded as part of the application. I can share my screen if that's permitted.
Is that permitted?
Yeah, I think so.
That's acceptable.
Bear with me one moment. You'll
Yeah,
have to let me know if you can see.
yeah, we can see that now.
So this is one of the street elevations that was submitted as part of the dialogue with the case officer during the application. So here you can see the existing public house, the proposed dwelling this side, and also further across are the 2 new semi-detached dwellings to the right-hand side of the pub, which are, they were approved prior to this application.
Yeah.
So the heights of the proposed dwelling will be no higher than the heights of the listed building.
That's why I was confused by that picture, because I did see that picture, but where's Deer Lane in respect to that?
Deers Lane will be in this gap here.
Right. Okay. So that's the neighbour. So
this would be the neighbour. That's the one to the left is the new build. I think it's Orchard Cottage or something, a name to that effect. And that's the other side of Deers Lane, so you can see the heights there. So it's totally sort of in keeping with the heights of both the listed pub and the adjacent properties.
Okay, and another question, if I may.
Yeah.
So there's a fairly large apron for parking at the front there as well. I mean, is that something that the planning officer insisted on? Because it looks like there's for property number 3. There's a double garage and a space in front, plus at the front, around the front, there's also a space, plus 2 visitor spaces, and then there's 2 further spaces for property number 2, which obviously is fair enough. But was that a requirement to have such a big parking apron in a conservation area?
It was in order to meet the Oxfordshire County Council highways requirements.
What he's saying, some of that area outside plot 3 is actually for plot 2 parking.
Yes,
That's right. Yeah. So there's plot 2. There's 2 spaces. Plot 3 has 1 space plus 2 visitor spaces.
Yeah.
Is
The visitor spaces. The visitor spaces are to provide visitor spaces for all plots, I must add.
I think in the report it says it conforms to the highways standards. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay. I've got one question for you. On the new build plot, the front face, the one facing the main road going through, so you propose that. We've got a word. Remember me, Peter. Flint with brick facings. Yeah, but on the end, and the end is on the end is equally visible because it's on by the road there, and the lane that goes through. It's pure brick. Seems to me that's correct. Not present a very nice outlook to that end of the building, that face of the building. Is there any way you could actually change that?
It could be changed. That certainly could be changed. There's no, I suppose, no fundamental reason why it couldn't be. The sole reason really is because as you look around the conservation, there really is a mix of the 2 materials, and quite often on the prominent elevations they would have used flint work and some brick coin detailing, On these, I say, slightly less prominent elevations, they would have been slightly more modest. That was purely the design intention there. So, but it could of course incorporate flint work as well.
In this instance, it is less prominent, but it's not. It is quite prominent, that face, and will affect the outlook of the building.
So, Chair, just to be clear, we're talking about the northeast elevation.
I think that's the northeast elevation. Yes, yeah. So we could consider making that flint and brick.
Yes.
You nodded, yeah.
Yes, sorry, yes.
Right, committee. Has anybody else got any questions before we move on? No, I've seen none. So thank you very much, Mr. McCreed. Yeah, get on to debate. Yeah. Okay. Joe, do you want to speak? Board councillor, you are here.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to echo some of the concerns expressed by Councillor Corbishley from Checkenden Parish Council. Many of you attended a site or have been rather to Checkenden, which is much appreciated, and you've seen with your own eyes what a very, very special conservation area they have in Checkenden. It's really unique, actually, in the area insofar as it's almost entirely untouched apart from one new house. So this is a very, very special conservation area, and it's vital that whatever goes into that conservation area is the absolute highest standard when it comes to design and sensitivity, size, bulk, massing, location, and materials. So I will leave it to you to decide, but I just wanted to very much emphasise that this is a very important conservation area in the Chilterns AONB, in a very important building.
Thank you. Right, we can go back to the officer, Paul Lucas. Have you got any questions for him? Paul, you still there? He is,
Yes.
Yes, he's there, yeah. Right. Councillor Roberts.
Paul, this is not down to you, but we've had this before. I'm trying to read these drawings, and I've just managed to find out what page numbers they are, and I've just written them down, like page 73. You're not going to be able to read it unless you've got a magnifying glass. And it goes on to some of the other pages as well, page 79 and 80. I've got no chance of reading the legends, the information there. And some of the other drawings, I just can't read anything, and I don't think that's reasonable. And this is not for you, Paul, but I don't think it's reasonable for members to be having these papers in front of them when you can't read the details on it. Now, is it a problem with the original drawing, or is it when they've been reduced? The size has been reduced.
I can answer that if Paul is.
Yeah.
It's a reduction, I'm afraid. Yeah. So we have them at a standard that we can obviously read them and enlarge them in the use of when we view them online, but when we're focusing on the detail and examine that. But I accept your point, Councillor Arlott, that when it comes to sort of putting them into agenda papers, it obviously there's a lot of information there, and the text is too small to
even if you get the page numbers right, that would be fantastic.
Any questions for Paul?
Yeah, I'll answer them then. I think one of the important views of this development is from the when you're approaching from the northeast, actually from the centre of Checkenden, so leaving the village, and it's sort of the prospect of seeing the. We did see a photograph earlier of the pub. According to the elevations, which in plan on page 80 and 81, there's some quite large trees that have appeared at the corner of the car park, which appear from this application to be installed as fully grown trees reaching the ridge height, almost as part of the development. I'm a bit sort of puzzled by this. That's quite a challenge, I would have thought. And we're not going to see these full-size trees for some 30 years, are we? Really, for the next 30 years, we're going to see the corner of a this new dwelling and the parking in front of it, and that to my mind is sort of doesn't enhance the conservation area. Quite the conservation officer's feelings it's okay. Yeah, of course, it's a matter of judgment, isn't it, as to whether the conservation area is enhanced by this development or not enhanced.
Yes, that's correct. It is a matter of judgment which the conservation officer has made. I mean, what I can comment on landscaping is that there's a landscaping condition proposed to secure full details of landscaping. And as our tree officer does tell me, it is possible to plant some quite large species. They can go in at a number of sizes, a range that can be required. So if we feel that it's necessary to put more mature species in, then it would be possible to do so. They don't have to be very small saplings. They can be more mature, and they can also incorporate a mixture of deciduous and evergreen species as well to give some sort of instant cover. But I do take the point. In general, it's going to be something that's going to mature over time and will add to the softening of the development as time goes by.
Yes.
Okay. Can we add that as a condition?
Chair, I would suggest that in respect of condition 16 that we have already recommended, if members want to make a specific reference to the importance of the landscape in that corner, we could amend the wording to include details of appropriate trees for the prominent recognise that's a prominent corner. So my view, I don't know whether Paul shares this, is that we could adapt condition 16 accordingly.
Yeah, we can change it from 16 to say that it will include more mature trees in that particular corner rather than low-level saplings. That would solve that site view, but yeah.
It would be possible to do that, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Paul. Any further questions for the officer? No. Okay. To a motion, please.
I'd like to propose refusal.
Okay.
The officer has outlined the reasons why he believes that this should be approved, and they largely rest on a balance between the benefits of the scheme weighed against the harm to the conservation area and the harm to the setting of a Grade 2 listed building. I'm not satisfied that the benefits of an additional large house do outweigh the benefits to the community, do outweigh what the parish council has described as pretty egregious impacts on this very important conservation area. And once a building like this goes up, the harm is done and it can never, ever be erased. So I think we need to think very carefully before we approve a scheme like this that will permanently change the setting of a conservation area and the setting of a Grade 2 listed building, in my view, for the worse. I concede that this house could do very well in a suburban setting, but I'm afraid that the design and the impact on the conservation area is, or rather, the design is a design that I think you could see anywhere, and I'm not satisfied that the materials and that the design itself sufficiently reflects the character of this area. And I feel that the positioning of it in this very prominent location in a very important part of the conservation area causes harm that I don't think is outweighed by the benefits of the scheme. So I'm not satisfied that this is one that we should be approving. I'm not satisfied that it's one that we could feel comfortable with going forward should it be built up.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Is that seconded? Yeah, seconded. Councillor Albert, do you want to speak now, Ken?
Yeah, I do actually. If I was going to remove any planning policy from the local plan, it would be the word infill. And the problems we've had over the year with this word infill, and infill just seems to fill any space in this district, and that always comes forward. But I couldn't have put it any better than Joe Rob. You know, the agent mentioned about these are going to be. I'm not sure if he used the word affordable unit, but a 4-bedroom property there speaks for itself. It's definitely not going to be an affordable unit, and I'll probably even question the other two as well. And it all comes back to a conservation area. And we're only going to have conservation areas that look like conservation areas, or we're just going to build anything in them. And I think the proposal for this, you could find that design anywhere, anywhere in the district if you wish to look for it. It has nothing to that corner. And actually, I did drive up there on the way here today, and yeah, there is a space there. I would accept that, but not for the size of that building. And I say I totally support Councillor Rob on this one.
Councillor Knight.
I just wanted to echo that. To me, this is getting close to overdevelopment. I think looking at the scale of the village, I know it's not a lot of houses, but I think I would applaud the bringing the pub back into use, which sounds like the parish council is also perfectly happy with. But with another 2 houses there, and then the 2 that will be built there, and then this other new large one, that to me just seems unnecessary. And again, considering it has been recognised, there is some disruption to conservation. I don't think it warrants approval, because that's just overdevelopment in my opinion for that area.
Further debate?
Yeah, I'm quite conflicted on this, I'll be honest with you. I think I think they've considered the fact that they're putting a house there that's in line with the neighbouring one on Deer Lane. It doesn't look out of scope, out of proportion, should I say, with the neighbouring buildings. So I think they're nearly there. It's disappointing that they've gone for such a large parking apron. I think it's ridiculous in a conservation area, and I think the conservation area does need protecting. So I am very conflicted, but I think he's so nearly there to getting something that could be very good.
That's why we're here. That is why we're here. Anyone else want to speak? Peter, do you want to speak?
Yes, I'd like to echo the comments made. I think when you look at page 71, which is the elevation of this proposed new dwelling, it's a good old CGI, computer generated one, drag and drop. It's a template from any model houses that are on the design. And then Checkenden, further down the road, has some really fine arts and crafts buildings, Foundry House, and further down, it's noted in by Pevsner for the quality of the housing there, where this one just doesn't reflect any of those, has no interest whatsoever. As somebody said, it's an anywhere house. The pitch of the roof, the size of the windows, the fact that on the front it's flint and it turns around to a sort of brick. And we got the roof are just described as plain clay tiles. Well, why aren't they specifying handmade clay tiles, which makes such a difference when you get a conservation area. It's the details, the finished details of a new dwelling in a conservation area that make such a difference. And this just I'm afraid to say it's a slab ugly anywhere place. And I think so it's the opportunity to really enhance the conservation area while providing a new dwelling here. So I would certainly support.
Before I go back to Joe to sum up, I'm just taking advice from Paula.
Thank you. Yes. So we've got 2 applications. We've got a listed building application and an application for planning permission. The listed building application just concerns the former pub, and I think there's generally no objection to those works and the conversion of that building. The concerns that have been expressed are those covered by the planning application for the new build, and obviously the key concerns are around the impact of this new building on the setting of the listed building and the character and appearance of the conservation area, and the sort of particular concerns have been expressed about the prominence, the size, and the appearance of the new building. So my advice would be that those are the sort of stronger grounds of the range that have been mentioned during the debate.
Yeah. So I'll go back to Joe to sum up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Paula. I think it's all been said. And one thing I would add, and that is, I think Councillor Dragonetti pointed this out, as you travel west along Main Street in Checkenden, the vista opens up from very close, very pretty brick and flint arts and crafts buildings. The vista opens up into what was at one time the pub, and then a bit of a straggle of development beyond that of very historic houses, including an old rectory and some other bits and bobs. The key to this is that this is a opening up of the space, and that is a critical part of the character and appearance of the area, and that's a critical part of the conservation area itself. And cramming an additional house into that particular space, and one that's this prominent, I think will permanently harm that character of the conservation area. So that's my main reason for concern, and I don't think that that this building does anything to enhance that conservation area in the country.
Based on that,
Yeah.
okay, we'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour of the motion. Now, this is for P22 S3447 full.
Is that listed building consent?
No, that's not the list of buildings. This is planning consent.
The new build.
It's for the new build.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So this is for that particular application. All those in favour of the motion to refuse planning permission, please show. Oh, well, at least we're consistent with tonight, aren't we? So that is refused. I'm now looking for a motion for the listed building. No.
I propose we go with what offers a recommendation. There doesn't appear to be any substantive reason to refuse listed building consent, and I'm very pleased that Councillor Dragonetti has teased out the detail about the retention of the thatched portion of the roof. Thank goodness. And in the absence of any major concerns on the part of the conservation officer, I think listed building consent should be granted.
Okay, thank you. Is that seconded? Yep, thank you, Councillor. You'll speak.
I'm fine.
Okay, Councillor Arlott wants to speak.
I just want to speak on page 77 where it shows this extension out the back. Now that is a car bunker. I don't know what thought's gone into that. I haven't got a clue. I won't be supporting that because of that add-on at the back there. To me, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely crazy. Somebody wants to find a reason for it, but that to me is ridiculous. I'm sorry.
Is that not already there?
No, it looks like an extension of the back. Unless anybody can prove me wrong.
Or can you just clarify? I read that as extension at the back of the property as well.
Page 77.
Is this the element right at the very back being added to the
That's
wing? It's a reconstruction. There's a structure there already, and their proposal is to reconstruct it.
If we could have a photograph of the existing building on the screen, that would be really helpful, so you can just see that sort of outshoot.
It says that on the list.
Thank you, Tom.
It's already there. You just see it sticking out.
Yeah.
There.
So in physical form, that currently exists.
There. Sorry, that's the front.
That's Main Street at the front.
That's the,
We've got the equivalent view, the existing building.
we don't appear to have the right view, Paul, do we? I agree with Councillor Arlott on that particular issue, but I think that particular part of the building is already there, so they're just.
And we haven't got an objection from our conservation officer, which would be sort of key in terms of our ability to raise that as a concern.
It's also shown there, and it's sort of, but not really.
I did drive out there earlier, Chairman, and I couldn't do that.
No, that's just.
If I may, I've just gone on to Google Earth, and it appears that there is a structure on that footprint. Oh, there you can see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it is existing. Okay. Well, it's a valid.
Yeah.
The fact we all couldn't debate it again and look at it sort of tells us that. Yeah. All right. Sorry, we have a proposal to approve listed building consent, which is Proposed and seconded. Any further debate? No further debate. Can I to come back to Councillor Rob? Yeah, okay, so all those in favour of listed building consent, please. Thank you, thank you. So that's given.
So can we just go over refusing and then abstaining as well, just as a process?
Sorry, process, process. All those in favour, all those against, or abstaining? Abstaining. I'm not saying that. It was on the fence, everything. Okay. Anyone want to come to a break?
If I may.
Colour now,
We're going to Cullen.
page 85.
Okay, we'll restart. Page 85. And the opposite is Mr. Paul Bowers, sitting here. So,
Thank you, Chair.
over to you, Paul.
Good evening, members. The application before you this evening is an outline application. It is applying for the principle of erecting a two-storey dwelling on the site. With outline applications, all matters can be reserved for later consideration in a further application, or some matters can be fixed and considered at the outline stage. This application has fixed the access part of the development, but the matters of layout, appearance, and landscaping are to be considered separately in a reserved matters application following the grant of outline planning permission. The main issues, therefore, that can be considered this evening are whether a dwelling on this site is acceptable, whether the access is acceptable in terms of highway safety. Fulham is a village where infill development is acceptable in terms of housing policy. In the context of the green belt, infill development in villages is not an inappropriate form of development, and is one of the exceptions to allowing new building in the green belt. Questions, therefore, are whether the site is within the village, then whether the proposal constitutes infill development. Members will note from the report that there is a historical appeal decision where a proposal for outline planning permission was dismissed for a dwelling on the site. That decision is 45 years old. In the intervening period of time, the development plan for the district has changed several times over. In addition, the understanding and definition of infill development, what can be considered within and outside of the village, has evolved and been tested many times. At the point of the access and the application site, there are buildings on both sides of the road. When viewed on the ground today, it is my view that it feels like part of the village, as opposed to a site that is outside of a defined built-up area and in the countryside. In your officer's view, the site is located within the village. Once it's established if a site is within the settlement, it is then necessary to consider whether the proposal falls within the definition of infill. Infill is defined as the filling of a small gap in an otherwise continuous built-up frontage or on other sites within settlements where the site is closely surrounded by buildings. Directly north of the site is a dwelling, 14 Tollgate Road. The opposite side of the road is a Thames Water pumping station, and the outbuilding is located within the rear garden of 1 and 2 High Street. To the south is the existing dwelling at 15 Tollgate Road. There are buildings on 3 sides of the application site. Previous appeal decisions have turned on this issue, have established that this would be sufficient to qualify as being closely surrounded. The officers are therefore of the view that the development qualifies as infill. In terms of highway safety, this is an established access, and the Oxfordshire County Council Highways Officer has not objected to the development. Overall, your officers are satisfied that the development is acceptable, and this outline planning application for a single dwelling is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Stay at the table, please, for a while. I will object to speak, Siobhan Sargent. This is that.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, councillors, for listening to me. I'm super nervous. I've never done anything like this before. So
do speak up. We need to.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay. So
thank you very much for allowing
me.
me.
And you have 5 minutes starting now.
Okay. I'm speaking on behalf of the village of the photographs that you've seen. And I do live in one of those properties. And we do object to another infill. Culham is renowned over the years for having infill in that's been very unsympathetic to the village. The village is absolutely steeped in history going back to the late 1700s, early 1800s. Kiln Cottage is a very, very historic building, and it was originally built for the bricks to be built for St John's Road in Abingdon and also the village in Culham, which my property is also built from the bricks that were built on the back of Kiln Cottage. Kiln Cottage has a huge history, and it is really interesting that we keep that history without actually infilling on the actual area that they've proposed. Culham Village is gridlocked with traffic due to extra buildings all around that we can't cope in that village. We can't get off our drives, and we cannot cope with any more houses being built on Tollgate Road that impacts on high streets, especially when the A34 has an accident. We looked at proposals that when they did the application on item 12 and item 15, Mr. Gilbert Smith and Mrs. Gilbert Smith declared that there was no springs or any water source problems if the building was to be built. I'm not sure that it was submitted. I have copies here for each councillor to distribute to you. Do you mind if I hand them out?
Within your 5 minutes.
You will note they said that there is actually no water problems or a spring. There is actually a natural spring running through the proposed site. And this spring was used back in the 1800s to source water to Culham. I'm sorry it's a paper form, but I'm old school. As you will see, where it says spring, that is exactly where they want to build the property. The picture you saw on the screen that showed the gate is the gate for 15 Kiln Cottage, not for the proposed site. They've also said that no they are not removing any trees or shrubs. There is actually mature trees within that area where it says the spring, and you'll see the blue outline for all of that. There is over a 20-foot hedge in front of that, which will have to be removed for the property to be built. And as it stands at the moment, within their garden, there's a mature orchard that would have to be removed, all those trees. So there would be a new drive, it would not be a shared drive if there was a proposal to be agreed that you agreed for a building to be put there. So the gates that you're seeing will not be the gates for the property. So that means that hedge will be completely removed and another building will be exposed to the road and the parking will be on that road. As it stands at the moment, you cannot get on Tollgate Road and you can't get out of High Street. We're absolutely gridlocked in Culham and the problem is getting worse. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for Yvonne Sergeant? Councillor Sadler, sorry.
Can I just confirm what you're saying, that won't be a shared driveway, because it does say on the plan that
It does say that on the plans, but if they're building, he's already put a fence inside, block off that planning permission, and that double gate is an electric gate that allows him into his property.
We've got to say that what we've got before us does not say that. We can only go on what we've got before us.
Okay.
Can't project or think what might happen. Yeah. Councillor, that's all.
Just a quick one. You indicated there might be parking on the road, but I thought I saw from the pictures it's all WL lines.
It is all WL
So they
lines.
can't park on the road.
They can't park on the road, but the parking in front of the property will be backing onto the road. It won't go onto the road, but you will have drive similar to the other cottages where it is directly, the drive would be directly going onto the road. So you have to reverse into Tollgate Road to get out regardless, or whichever way you want to get on and off. Yeah.
Any further questions? Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Rob.
Yeah, I've got a question about the spring that you've kindly shown us a map of. So the council's ecologist has said there's possibly a water course on the site. The applicants have said it's a water feature. Is it a water course or a water feature?
It's a water course because it comes off the fields and all along this land that you see to the right and through there, that is a natural springs that come off that field. So it's actually a water course that runs through there.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you all for your time. We have a supporter, which is Jake Collins, the agent. Saw Jake currently on. Jake, you have your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. You do have a full and very comprehensive report for you from your planning officer recommending that permission be granted for the scheme, and I would commend that recommendation to you. I do, however, want to briefly touch upon some of the key planning issues raised by the scheme and to respond to some of the comments made by other speakers. The application is submitted in outline with all matters reserved save for means of access, and therefore seeks to establish the acceptability of the principle of the proposed development. The acceptability of that principle rests with compliance with policy H16 of the adopted local plan and native greenbelt policy. Apologies to Councillor Arlett, but policy H16 does state that within small villages such as Culham, infill development is acceptable. The first question is thus whether the site is within Culham village. Paragraph 6.10 of the report deals with this question and concludes that it is. Indeed, having regard to the character of the area and the juxtaposition with existing built development, clear sense, both physically and experientially, is that the site is within the village. Moreover, that conclusion is actively supported by the recently made neighbourhood plan. It states in paragraph 5.22 that the main village settlement is identified in the design code that forms part of the neighbourhood plan by 3 distinct area typologies. The plan depicting those area typologies is on page 30 of the design code. And this shows the whole of the site, and indeed the whole of 15 Tollgate Road, to fall within the linear extension typology. That is, the neighbour plan identifies the site as being within the main village settlement. Neighbour plan thus reinforces and evidences the conclusion that the site is within Culham. Second question is whether proposals amount to infill development. This is defined in policy H16 as the filling of a small gap in an otherwise continuous built-up frontage or on other sites within settlements where the site is closely surrounded by buildings. Contention, acknowledged and accepted in the report before you, is that the proposals fall within the latter, namely a site that is closely surrounded by buildings. In particular, there are buildings to the north and south of the site and directly opposite the site on the western side of Tollgate Road. That is, there are buildings on 3 sides of the application site. That extensive enclosure has been held in other planning and appeal decisions to qualify as a site closely surrounded by buildings. Indeed, this was confirmed in an appeal decision issued a few months ago relating to a site in Norton near Tame, where the inspector specifically noted that development opposite a site, but separated therefrom by a road, formed part of the enclosure sufficient to contribute to a site being closely surrounded by buildings. Accordingly, the proposals comply with policy H16 of the adopted local plan, and the principle of the development is acceptable. In addition, and as defined in the framework, limited infilling in villages represents an acceptable form of development in the Greenbelt. Given, for the reasons I've already outlined, that the proposals amount to infill development and the scheme is otherwise limited, it follows that the proposals are also acceptable in Greenbelt terms. Moreover, whilst means of access is the only fixed matter, the Highway Authority have confirmed that there are pedestrian and highway safety constraints to the development. I can also confirm, contrary to what you have heard, that the proposal in terms of means of access is to utilise existing access, and all parking and turning would take place within the confines of the curtilage of the property. All other planning considerations, including neighbour impacts, ecology, arboriculture, drainage, energy and sustainability, and potential land contamination, are matters that, as detailed in the report, can be controlled either at reserve matter stage or via a planning condition. Suffice to say that there is sufficient scope, given the scale of the site, for these matters to be satisfactorily addressed at the detailed stage. Accordingly, the proposals comply with development plan policy, and I would commend the recommendation to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Has anybody got any questions for the agent? Councillor Rowlett?
If I could just pick up the infill, I think to be fair to my previous comment, this is an infill between 2 properties, where the previous one was an infill between allegedly a house and a road. And that was what I was trying to make on infill. You know, it is an infill between a house and a road, and I would suggest no, whereas obviously this is between two properties.
I was purely picking up the slide.
I totally understand what you're trying.
Any further questions? Jake, can you enlighten us a little bit on this spring?
Yes, it is a question I've asked of the applicant several times over, and the response I've had then is that it is a water feature. I have looked at the consequence, however, that in the event that it is a spring, what that actually means. I've had some experience of this, and you may well know the site, but St Catholic Primary School in Tame is built across a series of springs, and I was involved recently, probably 5 or 6 years ago, in an extension to that school, which was over a spring. Didn't give rise to any material planning issues. There were some construction related issues at building regulation stage that were comfortably dealt with. But if it is a spring, as I say, I'm advised it is not. I don't actually believe that is a constraint in planning terms.
Just a question. I think to be resolved in the future, I think is the answer on that one. Okay, Sam Casey Rahay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sorry, Peter, sorry.
This is an outline application. Why, can I ask as of interest why you haven't put a full application in?
Well, to establish the principle of the development.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Just going on to this question of the spring, because I'll ask. It is presumably the spring and a watercourse, is it? That's on the site.
But what I'm aware of, and when I visited the site, is there is a water feature that runs through the back edge of the site.
Yeah, but
and eventually discharges into the River Thames.
Right. So it's a water course.
I refer to it as a water feature.
Okay. So because the policy in D4 of the South Oxford local plan seeks to protect water courses and requires new development to be buffered by a minimum of 10 metres.
But in response to that, I would say that a planning permission has been granted for a garage building on that site.
All right. Okay.
Feature, as I would call it.
Wow. But
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jake. Thank you. Sam, as a local member.
Hello, committee. Good evening. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, you're outside Whitney Flumps. Oh,
I am. I'm up there. Great.
Right.
Okay.
It's like everyone's.
Thanks. Yes. I'm not really speaking on behalf of the parish council because the parish council, because of some administrative errors, is not functioning at the moment. But I was there as a parish councillor when we considered this application and put in this objection. So I do know a little bit about it. I just want to make 3 points. One about the heritage asset. So it's designated in the Culham neighbourhood plan, which has just been approved and adopted as a heritage asset for the village. And I think it's important for the committee to recognise how much the setting and its garden is important to this building. It's more or less sits on its own. It's right on the edge of the village near the bridge over the river, so it's very close to the Thames. And it has, as you can see from the maps in your report, it has quite a large plot, quite a large garden, and it's a large house. It's not like the other cottages. It's quite distinctive. I think it's 5 or 6 bedrooms or something like that, and they're not like modern buildings. You know, it's a big building. And it has a large garden. I think Siobhan Sargent earlier explained how nice the garden was with its orchard, etc. So I think we need to think about that as it's quite isolated on its own there, and it stands out, and it's important to keep the setting of it as the Culham neighbourhood plan says. The second point I want to make is about infill. I think if you look particularly in your plans at page 99 and page 100, where you've got some maps, you'll be able to see that that it is quite far from the other 2 cottages on Tollgate Road. So Tollgate Road goes north-south, Kiln Cottage is to the south, and then the next building near it is quite far away, and there's only those 2. So the rest of that side, on the east side of Tollgate Road, there aren't any other buildings. So this is quite a distinctive part of the edge of the village, and behind it there aren't any buildings at all. It's fields, and like I said, to the north there aren't any buildings until you get to the main road where there's Wagner horses. Where the officer said opposite there are some buildings, not quite. Those buildings that are opposite the houses are, for a start, they're perpendicular to Kiln Cottage and much further to the north. They're not really neighbouring in any way. They're facing the high street, and there is a pumping station nearby. So I just ask the committee to think very carefully about whether you think this is infill. I rather think that it's too isolated and too far away from its neighbouring houses to be considered as infill. And we, as a parish council, thought quite carefully about whether this could be counted as infill, and we thought it really wouldn't. And that with its heritage value it was important to keep the setting as it was. And the third point I want to make, which has been brought up before, is the ecology. And so in paragraph 6.44 of your report, there's discussion, as we've heard, that it's a water feature and not a stream. I think, again, please, I refer you to the map on page 99 of the report, where you can see, I think, a little blue line. There's very distinctively a stream that goes down. It then sort of disappears a little bit there's a little detached garage building, and then it goes down south where the land drops away to the Thames. Now, this is, if you walk along the Thames path along there, east towards Clifton Hampden, there are 3 or 4, I think, streams along there, and that's a geological feature where there's some green sand on Kimmeridge clay, the clay that was referred to of the clay pit of the bricks that were taken out there and made there for Kiln Cottage. And that's created the springs where one's permeable and impermeable, and that's pushed the water out and goes along there. I did speak to a couple of residents who've been in Culham for a long time, one of who is a very good friend of the family who used to live here, so the Evanses, and they lived here for a long, long time, many decades.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
She confirmed that it is a stream. They used to grow watercress in there, and more importantly, I think it used to flood regularly, so the garden would flood and sometimes come up to the house. I feel that this hasn't been given as much attention in the report as it could have been for whatever reason. I think maybe the committee might want to come and have a look if you're not sure about this, or the ecologist, or go back and ask for more information. It would be useful, I think, for the committee to come and visit this.
Sam, that's your 5 minutes. Thank you. Right, committee, anybody got any questions for Sam? I don't see any. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance. Okay, where we go now? We go back to the officer. We go back to Paul. Questions for Paul? I'm sure somebody's going to ask me about this water course. Councillor Albert.
Well, not actually.
Oh, okay.
On 1.4, it's got the application states outline planning permission for the erection of a 2-storey dwelling. And then it goes on to say only the act of this application.
The development description will carry through to any subsequent application. So if it is the case, grant permission tonight, then I would expect the reserve matters of the details drawings to show a two-storey dwelling. But in terms of the actual what was fixed on the plans, that the access is what we are considering this evening.
Sadler.
I was just a bit concerned about the Councillor Dragonetti mentioned about the outline planning permission aspect, and I'm just a bit concerned about that. Why that is full application?
Through the chair, I mean that is the option that is open to the applicant. They have opted to go through this route to establish whether or not the principle is acceptable, and after that, they would then go through all the costs associated with having full plans and etc. drawn up, which is not necessary or required at this particular stage.
Is it not a bit of a kind of backdoor to something?
No, that's the applicant's prerogative. They can approach it either by establishing a principle or going for a full application. It's entirely their choice, and we can't. We have to assess it on its merits as presented to us, and here we are considering the access and the principle of the development. So that's a perfectly legitimate route for the applicant to have followed.
Councillor Whitmore.
I'll raise it because it clearly shows here that there's a water course at spring. What impact has that got? Because here we're deciding the access and the suitability of the plot for it to be developed, and no further than that. So the fact that there's water there, free flowing, what impact has that got on this particular application?
In terms of issue of flooding and drainage, the council's own drainage engineers have looked at this. They will see what's been noted on plans. They will see all the information that they use on a daily basis to come to their conclusions as to water courses and areas of flooding, etc. They have concluded that they don't object, certainly in terms of flooding, but have requested conditions associated with surface water and foul water drainage. The ecologist has raised it as a potential issue, and it is satisfied that in terms of ecology, that they need to submit a preliminary ecological assessment with any forthcoming further application. And I would agree with Mr. Collins in terms of his remarks about these things can be dealt with at the building control stage. They can be engineered into the design of the building, all of which the details we don't have, but they would form part of a detailed application that we could consider later.
So essentially, this is not of material significance of this application. That we're looking at a process.
That'll be correct.
Yes, that is one of the concerns, isn't it? That it's up to them. They can either move the building or not put the building over it, or put the building over it, because there's engineering solutions to this. Yeah. But that's not before us. No. Any further questions, Catherine?
But this, it is material to decide whether or not this is infill, is it?
The issue of infill is a key part of the assessment of this application.
Because I think there have to be questions about whether or not it is. I mean, I know, the 3 sides and all the rest of it, but it does seem to be pushing it, I think, in this case.
Can I ask a question? Well, I know this is not directly relevant, but do you remember once upon a time there was actually a specific definition of infill? Do you remember that in previous policy? And we got rid of that. We've replaced it with a much more open-ended definition of infill, which is more open to interpretation. So could you take us through the new definition of infill again, just so that it's in our heads clear? Because it used to be, it was a certain distance, wasn't it? Councillor Dragonetti knows.
No, there's no distance ever specified. Closely surrounded is what it used to say.
And then we had some inspectors' appeal decisions that gave us.
Close livings.
Yeah, exactly.
The definition of infill hasn't significantly changed over a number of years. I'll read it out if it will help. So, our local plan defines it as the filling of a small gap in an otherwise continuous built-up frontage, or on other sites within settlements where the site is closely surrounded by buildings. This is a particular point that comes up on pretty much every application that we deal with housing, and is the subject of appeals on a fairly regular basis. And we find certainly on each case, they are looked at to a degree on their own merit. In terms of this closely surrounded by, I think the general theme that we see is you don't have to have 4 buildings around an application site for it to be considered closely surrounded. It can be less than that, and certainly we have seen occasions where they have been 3 buildings enclosing it on 3 sides, which has been sufficient for an inspector to say, I'm satisfied that meets with the definition.
Yeah, clear as mud. Any further questions for the officer? Ben?
It's just another grey area one for me. In terms of the heritage asset, non-designated heritage asset, it seems there's a bit of conflict because the councillor and the speaker were saying that it is part of the heritage asset because it's part of that cottage. And as I'm understanding within the report as well, it's saying any area should be taken into consideration as part of the heritage asset. But then it's saying, but this is on the grounds, therefore it isn't, and that seems grey to me.
So this isn't the heritage asset in as much as it is not in the conservation area. The building is not a listed building on the statutory list. The neighbourhood plans identified it as a building of note.
Yeah.
And in terms of the setting of this building, the application site is to the north of where the existing building is, and the existing building will retain a setting, an openness around it, with this new development to the north, sitting alongside the other properties that are directly to the north.
If it chips away, that's okay, as long as there's a surrounding. Is that fair in some ways? If the asset itself, and you're saying the surrounding area still is intact because they are in, so that sort of eats into it. So am I right in saying that the consideration is if there's enough ground around it, we're okay, because that would be eating into the peripheral area? Is that fair?
I think there's probably 2 points,
Yes.
which are one, that this isn't a formal listed building, so it's not the same high bar that they would be if it had that formal designation. And secondly, we're saying as officers that we think the parent property, the main property, does retain a sufficient setting because of its distance from the new proposal.
Yeah, and it's not a formally listed building, so to say it's a heritage asset is debatable. Okay, any further questions? We're still in questions to the officer.
Yeah, so just look at the map on page 99. The southern boundary of the application site is rather sort of curiously wiggly. Any reason for that? Is that does it reflect something physical on the ground?
So are you referring to the application website area or the boundary of the site itself? Oh, okay. I can't think of a particular reason why it is that way, but I imagine that is how the applicants have wished to draw it in terms of how what would be subdivided, or how they wish the plot to be subdivided in the future.
I can ask a further question then. It's a bit hypothetical, but if consent is given for this bill, then presumably further closer to Kiln Cottage would be even more closely. There'd be more space, even more closely surrounded by buildings that are used like this.
That's Spaghetti, you'll know that we take this.
I can't speculate or we can't. No, you can only, Catherine.
Well, again, I come back to this. I think it is, you really got to be careful about declaring this as infill. There's a big gap at the moment.
You're sending questions to the officer,
right?
Not
Yeah,
a debate.
Yes, quite. But I find it difficult to accept. I'd like to find some good examples of such a big separation as appears to be here to be declared as infill, because this is has been withdrawn. It's a thin end of the wedge. I'm not very happy about that at all.
Okay, as I said, we're in questions, we're not in debate.
So. I know. Sorry. Yes,
okay. All right. If we finish that question, we can go into debate. But to go into debate, I need to have a proposal, please. A motion. Yes, Councillor.
I reluctantly support this recommendation.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Yes, thank you, Axel. Do you want to speak now, Axel?
Yes.
I'll let Ken speak first.
I've heard of all the questions, discussion on this so far. Unfortunately, this to me, whereas the other one is an infill plot, and we are guided, obviously, what Paul's been saying about infill, and I don't think we can say it's not an infill. The piece about the spring, and I've built actually over a spring before, amazingly enough. But I haven't built on a spring before. That's the thing. But I don't think that's down to us to tell a builder or an applicant where they can build and where they can't build, where there's a spring. Eventually, if they wish to build on that, it's going to cost them a lot of money. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But that's not our problem. But it looks to me that what the outline has shown us, that the build is outside the spring anyway. So I don't believe that is a reason for refusal. Unfortunately, it's outlined, as Paul said before, there will be reserved matters where they may well come back to the committee. Am I right saying? So the reserved matters could come back to the committee, and unfortunately, I can see no reason why we should consider refusing this application at this stage anyway. So
thank you, Councillor. Councillor Holt.
Yes.
Now, yeah.
Yes, thanks. Been unhappy about it. It's not a material significance to this particular plan in front of us. It is outline planning. Matters of concern will need to be dealt with later. Officers recommend to go ahead, and I can't see if this was appealed that we would win. So unfortunately, go with officers' recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Axel. Right, now I'm going to debate. If anyone else comment on it, I think Nick speaks for it.
I think it would be regrettable to allow this to go ahead because it's it's just starting a new ribbon development, isn't it? It's you allow it there, and then suddenly the gap is suddenly not that significant anymore, and well, you might as well infill that as well. And before you know it, you've just continued the problem.
Your opinion.
And I think to some extent equal to what Councillor Hall and Councillor Bernal said, I feel like it's a reluctant, there's no solid grounds to turn. I've got serious reservations about the next stage and various things. Like I can't see how, but that's for the next stage, which I understand can't be considered. So I think I sort of second or third or whatever you would call it now. The views.
Are you going to support? Like you supporting the recommendation?
Yes, reluctantly.
Yeah, reluctantly. Yeah, okay. Any further debate? No further debate.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
No.
Yeah, I think this is regrettable. The only thing I would say, and it stuns me sometimes that Highways has no problem with some of this stuff, to step out of your front gate, be immediately plowed into by passing cars. I mean, but there is already a property there. There's already an access there, you know, so I don't think that there's any reason. And unusually, there's actually a pavement on the opposite side of the road, which is more than you can say for a lot of these sort of rural villages where there's no pavement whatsoever. And you're walking your dog being, you know, terrorised by passing vehicles. So I don't feel we have good enough reasons to refuse it, unfortunately, because I don't love it myself. But I don't think we have the reasons.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hall. I'll go back to Councillor Arlott to start.
Yeah, I think the majority of us are singing from the same hymn sheet. But this obviously comes down to policy, and you know I cannot see any policies that we could refuse it on, or no one's put any policy reasons forward for refusal. As I say, I think the next stage we'll be interested. What Joe Robb's just been mentioned about access. You know, I would imagine Oxford County Council Highways will bring in. There are certain figures on what's the word I'm looking for? That's right, yeah. On display of what you can see. It looks a fairly straight bit of road there, which vehicles could go faster. I can accept that, but I just don't believe at this stage there are any policy reasons to refuse this.
Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the proposal for officer's recommendation to accept some sort of please show. All those against?
Yeah. Well, against.
You're against.
Yeah.
Just put your hand up, then Darius can count it. You know. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Darius. So that's it. Passed. Okay. Right. Agenda item 11. Sorry. Agenda item 11 has gone for a site visit, so we're not there. Agenda item 12, which is 35 Gamer Gardens in Henley. And it's Davina.
Yes, you just
Tia.
page 1, 2, 3.
Page 1, 2, 3 of your copies. Nice. Over to you, Davina. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This application is referred to the Planning Committee as the application has been called in by Councillor Arlott on the grounds of the development being out of character and unneighbourly. The site comprises a 1960s linked detached two-storey dwelling located within a cul-de-sac of Dana Gardens within the built-up area of Henley-on-Thames. Planning permission sought for a proposed first-floor side extension above the existing garage, as detailed within the submitted plan. The plans also show the erection of a small ground floor rear terrace and pergola located at the rear of the existing garage. Dana Gardens' character is formed by a mixture of 1960s terrace dwelling and linked detached dwellings, such as the application site. The first floor extension would be set back from the front of the dwelling and set down from the original roof line, which avoids creating a continuous building line and reduces the terracing effect, as recommended in the Council's Joint Design Guide for side extensions. The officer's report sets out clearly why the proposal is deemed to comply with the local plan, the neighbourhood plan and the Joint Design Guide. As stated earlier, Dana Gardens comprises of housing, which is both terraced and linked detached dwellings sitting alongside each other. In this regard, linking the dwelling with the adjoining dwelling at first floor level would not be at odds with the grain of the surrounding built form within Damer Gardens. Paragraph 6.9 of the officer's report sets out why officers do not consider the proposal would have a harmful impact to the neighbouring property. In conclusion, the scale and design of the proposed development would be in keeping with the character of the building and the surrounding area and would not materially harm the amenity of the neighbouring properties. In conjunction with the attached condition, the proposal accords with the relevant planning policy and the application is recommended for approval.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, can I just qualify one thing on 1.1? These are not my grounds for refusal. These are the grounds from Henley Town Council. I put in the application on their behalf. So if the two items about the grounds of development being out of character and neighbourly, these are not from me.
That's not your, they're from the town council.
Henley Town Council.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a number of speakers, so I can call Ronald Chalk. Yep, okay, thank you.
Good evening to you all.
And you have your 5 minutes.
Yeah. Right. We have lived at 36 Damer Gardens, Henley, Thames for 21 years. Our property is linked detached, joined by a garage to number 35 Damer Gardens. We wish to appeal against this application. The proposal is to form a first floor extension that will close the gap between ourselves and our neighbour over the garage. If this was to happen, it would cause a terracing effect. Our cul-de-sac has a very distinct linked detached house topology, and filling the gap would completely destroy the character. Number 35 and 36 immediately frame the street scene as soon as you turn into the leg of Damer Gardens, and the terracing effect, no matter how far back, is based on and not at the angle where it might have been a bit more discreet. No other house of our design has been extended in this way in the 60 years that the house has been built. We feel the application is out of character in the area by its mass and will close off a valuable open space. In turn, this will block a large proportion of natural light, especially in the winter months. The application also provides parking space for one vehicle that is currently space for two. We have indeed, as mentioned, the application extended our property. However, we are in a corner block and our extension does not cause a terracing effect. We are not attached to the neighbour's property. We would be willing to consider a proposal that steps in from our boundary wall so as not to fill in the gap completely. We hope that you consider our objections. Thank you for listening to our objections.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chalk. Yeah, thank you. Stay there and see if the commission got any questions for you. Councillor Arnold.
Yeah, Mr. Chalk, when you purchased your property before you extended it, how many bedrooms were in there?
There's 3 bedrooms.
And is your property the same as next door?
Exactly the same.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chalk. So just to clarify, as we look at the screen, you are the property on the right, is that
Yes,
correct?
that's right.
And the property on the left, your neighbours to the left are wanting to extend
To fill in.
that gap.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I know Damer Gardens, a friend of mine used to live there, he's just moved, great street, very distinctive 1960s houses. Has anyone else, there aren't too many that are like that though, are there? Because on this eastern end of Damer Gardens, you know, around the cul-de-sac bit, you've got terraces there, don't you? So how much of the street is like this?
Just on that area, if you go up on the right-hand side, an arrow to which is in there in the cul-de-sac, and the others with the photos we see a bit earlier are the far end, and they're 4-bedroom houses built completely different the other side of the estate.
Okay, thank you. Oh yes, I see. Thanks.
Yeah, they're all different.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Jack.
I understand there's an issue over the party wall. This development will use party wall. Have you had sort of legal advice on party wall?
But another thing is there's an overflow pipe what goes out from my side, and the distractor fan, and there is a lovely tile hanging on the other side as well, where they want to build up to.
Right.
That's a legal issue, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's
a consequential legal issue.
Yeah,
not the
it's
political.
We was lucky, as I say, because that's on a Victorian side there, an old big old house, which is way back, and that was it. And that's when I with their children, and we put the extension on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Right, our supporter who's with the architects is the supporter here.
I'm speaking on behalf of the clients acting as the agents.
What's your name, sir?
Jeremy Collins-Hast.
You are what's on my.
Good.
Okay, and you have your 5 minutes, which starts right now.
Lovely, thank you very much. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of this scheme. I'd like to take this opportunity to address the concerns raised by consultees and highlight the key design decisions that have been made in development of the scheme. The proposals have been carefully designed to balance the spatial needs of the clients, creating habitable space which is compliant with the relevant minimum space standards, whilst also being competent of its setting. We've kept the ridge and massing as low as possible, significantly below the primary ridge of the property. The line of the extension is also significantly stepped back from its primary elevation. This creates a proposal which is modest in its stature to that of the primary mass and clearly subservient. Simultaneously avoids as much as possible any terracing effect. It also mimics the mass of the neighbouring number 36 of the extension, which incidentally has a very similar layout to that we are proposing, in so enforcing a rhythm as to the street scene established by number 36. I'd like to take this opportunity to respond to concerns raised by consultees in regard to overshadowing and loss of light. The buildings in their current form are oriented in a northwest to southeasterly fashion on the site. This means that for the majority of the day, buildings actually sit in their own shadow, and by virtue of that angle, whilst we are infilling between the two for the majority of the day, this isn't actually a significant change to the status quo. Inn Gardens as an area is characterised by high density terraced and linked detached dwellings. This fact is coupled with the fact that neighbouring number 36 and nearby number 42 have had similar extensions, meaning that premises would not be out of character or overdeveloped when compared to their immediate setting, as a precedent has already been set by other properties. The design of the building has been carefully crafted, drawing on the existing material palette and upgrading materials to achieve a high quality appearance that complements the setting. The current building is typical of the 1960s, with brick as the primary material, accompanied by a range of secondary materials. The existing building currently has a patchwork appearance consisting of buff bricks, hung tiles, some weatherboarding, new PVC windows, white fascias, as well as some contemporary metal framed windows. The proposals seek to upgrade and consolidate the material palette to improve the overall visual appearance of the scheme, creating a simple and homogeneous appearance, which is in keeping with its setting. I'd also like to touch on carbon reduction opportunities within this site. When considering carbon reduction, the replacement of the materials also provides the opportunity to upgrade significantly the thermal performance and reduce the energy consumption. Retrofitting buildings is one of the most important tools we as designers have in combating climate change, and in turn providing better buildings that are capable of adapting to serve future generations. I hope the points raised addressing concerns by the council reinforce the fact that these have been carefully considered to provide the best possible design for this particular site. I would urge the council to consider the high positive impact this building will have on the immediate space for the clients, the improved visual appearance, and an opportunity for improved thermal efficiency, which will, in the results, be reducing the carbon requirement.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure you'll sit there. I'll committee have some questions for you. Councillor Arlott.
Yes, I asked Mr. White how many bedrooms were in his property when he purchased it, and the answer was 3. If you look on page 133 of this report, it shows that you're proposing to change 2 of the bedrooms into studies. Yes, is that correct? Yeah. If I was to purchase this property in a year's time and decided to change those 2 studies back to bedrooms, what would be stopping me?
Nothing.
So why have you only allowed 1 car park space when you should have at least 2?
Because we're retaining the parking as it's existing, and we believe that this position in Henley, as a well-connected place, provides adequate transport connection.
But the existing is 2, and you're proposing 1.
That's not correct. We aren't proposing any reduction. I don't know where that comes from.
In the report.
Right, I think that's incorrect.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor?
It possibly ignorance on my part, but it's all very well having a extension for your clients and all the rest of it, but how, I mean, is it normal to voice such a change on the next door neighbour?
Well,
it clearly doesn't welcome you.
No, that may be the case, but I can't speak on for any conversations that have happened between our clients.
No, but I mean, somebody like me, is this acceptable practice?
So just to clarify, the applicant is entitled to make their application. It's for us to decide on planning merits. Separately, if planning permission was granted, there would be a need for a party wall act between the respective applicant and the neighbour, and that would be for them to sort out. And obviously, any grant of planning permission doesn't undermine any civil rights that the neighbouring property owns. So it stands up. The planning legislation stands apart, but doesn't mean that obviously it doesn't infer, if we grant permission this evening, it doesn't infer that the neighbour is therefore agreeable to the extension proceeding. And it's for the 2 parties to reach agreement on that. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I've got a question for the.
Has the garage been turned into a store? From that page 133, it looks like the garage is now.
As the property was purchased by our clients, there was a bathroom at ground floor. I'm not sure how long that has existed for.
So that's pre-existing.
Yes.
It looks like because it says 132 says garage, 133 says store. I'm just wondering. Yeah, and I mean the parking, that does seem to be quite restrictive for what is really going to be a 4-bedroom house. I mean, I know we say studies, but I tend to agree with Councillor Arlott that just a way around it.
Well, that's going to be. Sorry, we take what we've got in front of us. Can we finish with the questions for Mr. Collins Hayes before we move on to discussions generally? Yeah. Any further questions?
I'll just go back to the parking, and I can refer to 6.10. Parking. The site currently has 1 parking space in front of the garage. The space would be retained. The proposed extension would result in the creation of 1 additional bedroom. 1 parking space is considered acceptable for the number of bedrooms given the site's highly sustainable location in transport. Well, yes, okay, it would do, because it's only showing 2 bedrooms on the plan. So that was my question. It states in the report that there's only 1 car park space there, not 2.
Yes, well, one of the studies, I think by space standards, would not be sufficient to be classed as a bedroom. Be a study. So at most, we could actually, I think, legally so for is 3.
That's fine. Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Tom. Right, Ken, do you want to speak as ward councillor or no? speak during the debate? Yeah, okay. Right, we'll go now to planning officer. Any questions for the planning officer? Councillor Rob.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Davina, I had a question about overlooking, and it seems from the report that it's one of these cases where number 36 is overlooking the development site. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. This clearly will mean overlooking into the garden of number 36, but the rationale for that being acceptable is that 36 already overlooks this one. Is that the case? And that is established planning policy?
Well, yeah, so I've accepted that there will be some overlooking.
Yeah.
Obviously, the existing situation is number 36 also has a conservatory at the rear on the ground floor. So that will obscure some of the view from that window at the rear. It will, prevent some, it will block some of the view. Also, I've considered that it is a built-up area. So there's already mutual overlooking from existing windows. So to some degree, in a built-up area, you have to accept that there is some level of mutual overlooking from first floor rear windows in the rear gardens.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Sadler?
What's the position on? I think the whole issue of loss of value is not material, is it?
Not material. No.
I mean, is it that because 36 has had this extension that therefore they have a right at 35 in the view of the? Is that not that's
not relevant?
Yeah, I've considered the application on its own merit, notwithstanding that number 6 has had an extension very similar.
If number 35 wants an extension, you have to go on the other side. Maybe it's not got room out there. Just look that there was space there.
It has no right to an extension, doesn't
it? No, sorry. No.
Got a very quick one. Just picking up on Councillor Arlett's very astute point about parking. So looking at these plans, and one doesn't want to assume that people are seeking to perhaps build a wall at all. Looking at the store, well, the store is a study, and what is currently 2 studies upstairs is a bedroom and possibly an ensuite. I mean, one can't speculate, but using common sense, there is no way this is a 2-bedroom house. And yet we've lost a garage and we have 1 parking space. And as I said earlier, I know this street because my friend lived there. It is a nightmare. It is a nightmare to park on. It really is terrible. And is this something you considered to be looking at those plans, thinking, is this really a 2-bed house?
I mean, obviously, I have to take on face value the plans that are submitted to me. Obviously, we've had COVID, so a lot of people do work at home now, and they have converted bedrooms into offices and spare rooms into offices. So I'm taking on face value that the applicant has been honest here and has converted those bedrooms into an office. So I can only base my decision and assess it against planning policy on the plans that are in front of me. I can't make assumptions that they're not accurate or that they haven't put forward what is actually the case.
Very quick one, clarification, which everyone else knows. I'm just being a bit dense. What would be the minimum parking for 3 bedrooms?
For a 3-bedroom house, I think the maximum parking requirement would be 2 spaces. So you have the
maximum.
Maximum. There's no minimum. It's just a maximum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can't book these standards and phrase these days.
Yeah.
Can't have more than 2.
3
3
is 2, 4 is 2 as well.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we can condition that those studies remain studies? Is there?
Because ultimately, people can make internal alterations stuff obviously without any permission. But
I asked the question.
Yeah,
I didn't expect an answer. I would have to just ask the question. Yeah. Right. I think we've finished with questions for Lavina for the moment. Where are we going now? We're going to debate, so we need a proposal. Councillor Albert.
Yeah, I've looked at this thoroughly, Chairman. After the site visit we had on Tuesday, I visited Dana Gardens, and I know it fairly well. And where Mr. Shaw lives, they are detached link down there. On the left-hand side, before you get to his property, they're all detached linked as well. And then as you come into Dana Gardens on the right-hand side, they're all detached linked as well. The only one that I saw that had work done to it was number 32. And that one was similar, but it had a metre gap between the extension and the other property next to it. I've seen no similar plans like this, where someone's built from one house to the other. That's basically Dana Gardens. I've read the report and I've looked through the report again. I've visited the site, and I think there are too many reasons for refusal here. We've just won an appeal. In Henley on items from the joint neighbourhood plan, which took us 5 years to resolve. And I'm going to propose refusal on this on our own local plan, DES 2, enhancing local character. It doesn't enhance the local character of the area. And DES 6, the residential amenity. And also the joint Henley and Hertfordshire neighbourhood plan, policy SD, fully the local character. But one of the big ones is the policy T6 parking standards. When we did the neighbourhood plan, there's massive problems with on-street parking in Henley, and if anybody wishes to see the problem tonight, just drive around there about 9 o'clock tonight, and you won't see a space all on the street. So we specifically put policy T6 parking and standards, where you had to adhere to these standards. And one of the items was, with an application come forward, you can't have a less space than you had in the first place. By all accounts, this had 2 car park spaces. They're now reducing to 1. What I can't get my head around, and there's a few people asked the question, is why would anybody want 3 studies in a house? I think I might go home tonight, actually, and my 4-bedroom bungalow, I'm going to make it into a 1-bedroom. I'm going to have 2 studies. I'm going to have a games room. And I'm going to have 1 bedroom. I'm going to get in touch with SODC in the morning and see if I can get a reduction on my rates. So I think I'll get a big reduction for that. Yeah, anyway. The big problem on this is that if this property was to be sold, and we did get these extra bedrooms back again, and they've obviously been used as bedrooms in the past, as Mr. White told us. And these could straight go back to bedrooms. You're going to finish up with a 4-bedroom property with 1 car park space. And as we've just seen now, there's no space on the street to park. So DES 2, DES 6, policy SD3 and policy T6 parking standards. We would have won an appeal all day long on this. No doubt about that whatsoever. And I'd even stake money on it. So I'm proposing refusal for those 4 reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Is that refusal supported? Is it seconded? Thank you, Councillor Howard.
If I offer some comments, please, Chair, if that's okay. I think I've got 3 areas of concern that Councillor Arlott has raised, which are essentially impact upon the character and appearance of the area. And obviously, you've had pointed out that there's not another property that is the same as this situation, and we've seen that this gap is visible in street scene. So it's a character argument. The second argument is around residential amenity. And if we were to refuse permission, we have to specify whether that is a loss of light, privacy, or overbearing appearance. My own view is that I think it's very difficult for us to demonstrate that. As officers, we've concluded that the privacy issue we think is acceptable, but we would have to specify if we go down the residential amenity route, we'd have to be specific about what we consider to be harmful. And then on the car parking standards, just for the record, I don't think there is any reduction in car parking space. I think there's 1 at the present time and 1 proposed. If what you are effectively saying is that because of the increase in accommodation levels, you've got concerns about the pressure on parking, and there's comments about the level of existing pressure on car parking in the area, then I think it's an argument that in this particular case, that notwithstanding highway issues and our comments about sustainability of the location, it's about the increase in the level of accommodation and there not being one space not being appropriate for that. So I suppose I'm advising the issues of impact upon the character and appearance of the area and possibly the car parking position of the two stronger grounds of the three that have been raised.
I think a little bit differently. If you see which way this property is facing, and the sunlight goes from, we know, from east to west, unless you live in New Zealand, so it goes from east to west, you're going to get the late afternoon sunshine, especially in, later in the year. You're going to lose all that light going through if that gap is filled up there. Mr. White, Mr. and Mrs. White will lose all that light going through, all that sunlight going through, if this was to take place. I'm sure if they would have meant to have built these in the first place, they would have done. And obviously there was a reason. But I think what you have to look at, these are 60-year-old, these properties. Only one has done any work on them in the 60 years, which shows there's a problem somewhere. Otherwise, we'd have had lots of these extensions taking place. So there must be a problem there somewhere. I do feel there would be a loss of light going through there. That's my view.
Whether that's sustainable.
Yeah.
Is a garage not counted as a parking space?
So
it is, but the existing, it's shown that it's not big enough to a garage because it was changed to a store.
It's a garage, but it's not a garage.
Yeah.
It's a garage, you can't get a car in.
No.
Okay, so I was saying there was existing two, down to one. Right, so where are we?
So we have a motion on the table which raised three areas of concern: the character appearance, the residential amenity, and the adequacy of the parking. I think we're yet to, or did we get a second? Sorry.
I got a second there, yeah. Got a second there, and then you.
My advice about the
Your advice,
reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, strength of the reasons. Okay, I'll go to see if she wants to speak now or.
Thank you, Chair. I have my resolve on this has strengthened. I have a great deal of sympathy with what the architect is saying about retrofitting existing buildings and making them fit for the future. But my big concern about this is that this is a very, very distinctive 1960s development in Henley. It's unique in that regard. And one of the keys to the character and appearance of this 1960s development, and I have to say personally, I love 1960s architecture and I love these houses. They're full of light and they're full of air. They're wonderful. One of the key distinctive features of this street is that where you have these linked detached properties, there is a feeling of airiness between them, and that has been maintained almost consistently throughout those linked detached properties on Damer Gardens. Adding this extension in and blocking off that feeling of light and air and space would, I think, set in motion a chain of events that would lead to terracing and the total loss of the distinctive character of these 1960s buildings. I don't think we do enough to protect the character and appearance of our 1960s housing estates. And this is very special in Henley. And I think we need to preserve that very distinctive 1960s design, and this would erode it irrevocably. So that, for that reason alone, I would refuse.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay. Right, I'm going to debate. Does anybody want to debate? Does anybody want to say whether we support it or against it? Or
I'm kind of sorry. I'm kind of reluctantly against the proposal to refuse. I have full empathy with the neighbours and with the issues raised, but I personally can't see any legitimate reason that wouldn't get challenged and won if it came back to us. The parking has been mentioned, it's not being reduced, and as I understand it, we've been told that there isn't minimum parking anyway. The extension, according to the architect, has been specifically designed to be in character with the neighbouring property, which is the same principal design. The sunlight has been described as, I think, as I understand it as well, there's an area at the back of the other house which is roof, so that wouldn't have some going onto it anyway. It's a a roofed area. And as I say, it's reluctant, but I personally can't get to reasons why I think it should be.
You're saying that's
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Ed, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I need to add my voice to the people refusing, because I think it's egregious to the neighbours terribly, and I feel for them really. I think it's an awful thing to do. If it were me, I'd be very against having someone building up against my party wall for all sorts of reasons.
That's a legal issue, but yeah, we do consider it. Yeah. Anybody else, Peter? No. I'll go back to Ken. Are we settled on the reasons for Joe introduced something new?
I think the second of the motion essentially reinforced the first reason for refusal, which is about the terracing impact and characteristics of the area. Yes, I suppose I'm advising Councillor Arlott that I think the second reason for refusal is not a strong one. So
You say not as strong.
no,
That was which one, sorry?
that's the impact on of loss of light arising from effectively infilling an area that sits between the built form of the house and the next door neighbouring wall.
I think Councillor Robb touched on that as well.
Sure, that's
I was broadly satisfied with
Let's say touch.
Ken.
Can I just bring up the what Ben mentioned about number 36? Number 6 is obviously fortunate. It doesn't link on to another property. So to say that would be similar, I don't accept that. It's, he was probably fortunate that they bought the end property, which went on to a long back garden, and that obviously doesn't affect anybody. Where the one we're looking at now, and you've got to look at each application on its merit, and in my view, this doesn't have a lot of merit at this moment in time. So that would be my only point that I'd raise. Other than
Okay, thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken. Do you want to add anything, Paula?
Just before we go to the vote, can I just so we've definitely got a concern around the impact on the character of the area. I've offered my advice in respect of the impact upon number 36 as amenities, and then we had the car parking issue. Can I just clarify whether or not we voted?
Well, the car parking issue is all part of the joint Henley and House and neighbourhood plan.
So,
even if it was to put whatever name you want to on the plan, be it a game show, study, or whatever, at the end of the day, they were bedrooms. And I think we need to be careful there, and maybe in the future as well, when we see names called on bedrooms, exactly what are they? Are they bedrooms? But in the end of the day, they were bedrooms. There's no doubt about that. And obviously, Mr. White.
I think the answer is that they could be bedrooms in the future. That's your point, that there would be a planning control to stop them at a later date.
Okay, we can't look into the future, but if I was to put that house on the market, I would put it onto 2-bedroom house.
So just to clarify, the proposal at the moment is still to include a reference to car parking.
I think the neighbourhood plan will cover that.
Obviously T6 that you're referring to, that having regard to the increase in the size of the accommodation, that one car parking space is not judged to be adequate. And having regard to existing conditions locally in terms of pressure on car parking.
Yeah, it's firstly on the secondly, and secondly, so the actual reasons we're going with the character and appearance of the area and lack of parking provision.
Concerns about parking.
Just for the clarity of the minutes, is that?
Yeah, for the minutes, yeah.
So two reasons for
two reasons.
Yeah, okay. 2 reasons for refusal. Mainly the character of the area, not the lack of parking. Okay. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Okay, those against? Okay, that is refused. Right, and that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your time and giving us.
Susie, please can we end the broadcast?
Absolutely.